Let's bring in Sky News contributor Prue McSween and veteran broadcaster and journalist Dee Dee Dunlevy now. Nice to see you both. Thank you so much for joining me. Prue, OK, even if Penny Wong is what she's saying, you know, could be right there, that she really didn't know about an impending attack on Iran. What does it say, though, then about Australia's relationship with the US? Do they not trust us?
We're totally on the nose, clearly, and untrustworthy, as Albanese has proven. You know, she never really answers the questions. Everything's done through a political lens with Labor, so you can't really believe a thing that comes out of their mouth. I mean, it's appalling that, in fact, you know, the travel alerts were too late and so many Australians found themselves in this predicament. And, of course, she looked after the public service, which, you know, is her bread and butter, I suppose. So, you know, it's typical of Penny Wong.
Yeah, it's typical of Labor as well. Exactly. Dee Dee, what's your take on this? What do you think that signals?
Well, firstly, if I was an Australian traveller overseas, I'd be feeling very betrayed right now. I think this is a failure of the security protocols here in Australia. Penny Wong either didn't know anything, which is an indictment on her, or she knew something but chose not to tell Australian travellers in stronger terms that it wasn't wise for them to be going into the Middle East. So either way, it's a failure on her part. And I also wonder, has she picked up the phone and called the White House since to ask to be briefed more fully on the... I mean, they're not going to tell her, let's be honest. But,
tell her she's dreaming.
Yeah, tell her. I agree. I totally agree.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, why would they tell Penny Wong? I mean, she's been demonising the US. She's been demonising Israel, for that matter, for the past 2.5 years. I think that's a really great point, Dee Dee. Now, meanwhile, the Prime Minister has today been busy cozying up to a known anti-Trumper. This is the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, who's on an official visit to Australia. Carney has addressed both houses of Parliament, calling for stronger ties between the two countries to avoid being dictated to by the US. I found it quite interesting, Prue. He basically... he said along the lines that Australia needs to not be dictated to not only by the US but also by China. I mean, the US is our #1 ally, for goodness sake. Is he really suggesting that we could go alone without them?
This bloke is seriously on the nose with Trump. Why would anyone be taking any advice and wanting to get into bed with him, for God's sake? I mean, as it is, Albanese, for all that he's done in his past, is really a bit on tentacles, I think, with Trump as well. Why would we want to do this? Look, I understand there is some aspect to it which I think makes sense, that because we don't spend enough money on defence, you know, we're not really significant in the eyes of America, and perhaps we'll be, if we join forces with Canada and some of the other countries like Japan, etc., we may have more unity and strength through that. And, of course, the rare earths, it's good. There are feasible parts about this that make sense, but you don't want to risk alienating Trump or America in any way. And if we get into bed with this dude, I think we are really walking a fine line.
I mean, we're basically screwed if we do so. Dee Dee, what do you make of the Canadian leader's rhetoric while he's been down under?
Well, I think he's someone that I certainly don't have a lot of confidence in. I think he's yet to prove himself. Remember, he came to power when Trump was having a go at Canada over the tariffs, and he has a strong economic background, I'll give him that, in finance. And so he was the right person, I think, to be elected at that time, because I think the people thought that he was the person to fight back against Trump. But he's yet to actually prove himself. And if he's doing this little trip here to Australia trying to gather a gang, I mean, it's not exactly a formidable group, is it? You know, Anthony Albanese and Carney versus Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. I know whose gang I would like to be protecting my interests.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, the US just took out one of the world's biggest dictators, and what's Anthony Albanese and Mark Carney done for themselves to prove themselves? Absolutely nothing. Now, look, we've been predicting this over the past few nights on this program, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers has already, as you can imagine, started blaming the Middle East for the failures of the economy. Here he was this morning telling Australians to brace for the worst.
The full impact is still uncertain, but it's likely to be substantial. And we're upfront about that. We had our fair share of economic challenges even before the dramatic escalation of this conflict over the weekend. And this will put additional pressure on the global economy and on our own economy as a consequence. That's the difficult news. But the good news is what we saw in yesterday's national accounts is growth in the Australian economy as we finished 2025 was strong and broad and very welcome. And it provides a really robust foundation from which to confront these new uncertainties that we're seeing in the world.
Just as predicted, Prue, the war's come at the right time.
Oh, it sure has bailed him out. But of course, we do not forget, and we do understand that really these latest figures are reflective of, the Christmas period and also, the various sales that have been on. He is spending too much money. Everybody knows that. He knows that, but he cannot stop himself. And, for him to be clutching at straws and like a drowning man saying, oh, great, yeah, well, really, it's not my doing. It's all to do with the world and Iran. I mean, give us a break, Jim. We know you're a pathetic treasurer. You don't deserve to be in the seat. Go and write another book on Bob Carr, for example. Do something useful, because you're useless as a treasurer.
Yeah, do something useful with your life, I agree. But Dee Dee, I mean, this is perfect timing, isn't it, for Jim? Because the economy is going backwards under Labor, but now he's got a brand new excuse to use, doesn't he?
Hasn't it just given him a leave pass? Look, I think the Australian public are very smart and can see through it. It's like when COVID was being used as the excuse for everything. Oh, it's because of COVID. There's always going to be an excuse off it up. And I noticed his language was interesting. He said that the consequences could be substantial. So that if, in other words, to terrify us, if they're anything less than substantial, we'll all be going, oh, phew, oh, thank God, he did such a good job saving us, didn't he?
Yeah.
So, yeah. I just don't think our economy should be in such a a fragile position anyway. And he's let it become that with a debt of nearly $1 trillion. So, yes, I think he's probably counting his blessings that this has happened at this time.
Yeah, first it was COVID, then it was Ukraine, then it was economic headwinds, and now it's Iran. It's just perfect, all very perfect. Well, we've got to talk about the ABC. They've been a disgrace this week in the coverage of the Iran war, but no surprises because you recall it's bias during the reporting of Hamas's attack on Israel, and yet they still want more money from us. The AFR is reporting that the ABC's managing director, Hugh Marks, has reportedly made a last-ditch offer of $1,000 cash to every member of staff to avoid a strike after employees narrowly voted down a pay deal that would have boosted salaries by 10% over 3 years. Prue, here we go with a typical government department.
Hugh, do us a favour. Let them go on strike. No one will notice, for God's sake. It might save us some money.
That's it.
I mean, they've got to be kidding. They're not worth a pinch of poo, in fact, in terms of, pay rise. I'm sorry. And, as far as I'm concerned, their charter has never been met. They should all be sacked. It should become subscription. And frankly, look at what Sky's doing. We know we've got great regional coverage.
Brilliant.
We should be, just stepping in.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you all the way. Meanwhile, a Victorian Labor senator, his name is Raf Ciccone, he took a swipe at the ABC's John Lyons, that's one of their senior reporters, for accusing Anthony Albanese of spreading political propaganda over their position. He said if standing with the women beaten in the streets is propaganda, if opposing the execution of protesters is propaganda, if resisting nuclear blackmail is propaganda, then we have lost our moral compass. Dee Dee, it's not often that I actually agree with Labor, but he's spot on here. John Lyons has conducted himself, in my view, a disgrace this week.
Absolutely, and I've made note of that, Danica, that you're backing them on this particular issue. Look, I think with the ABC, when you think in broad terms, if you think of the ABC and what you're going to read there, you know that you're going to get something biased. But I think when coverage and when there's reporting on the ABC and content on the ABC regarding something like what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, in other words, we're facing absolute evil, there should be no bias at all. There should be no ability for anyone to make an accusation of propaganda. I just think it's the ABC continually delivering what we've become used to them delivering, and I agree with Prue and yourself. Take away their funding. We don't need them anymore. They don't deliver what we used to be able to, or we weren't able to get before social media and so many other options as far as media goes.
No, exactly. I mean, it's in their charter that they have to be impartial, and they have done the exact opposite. It's just absolutely appalling. Now, look, we've got to talk about Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. Gee, what a fascinating story. They have apparently both lawyered up, as you can imagine. There's millions involved amid their recent fallout, with ARN deeming Sandilands' behaviour an act of serious misconduct and a breach of his contract. And, of course, a contract between the two of them, which the pair had recently signed. It was worth about $200 million across 10 years. It's all over, isn't it, Prue? Wow. Wow.
Now, the soap opera, the reality show, do you feel?
I think so too.
I mean, really, give us a break. I mean, the interesting thing is ARN's share price has gone up since they've been dumped. So maybe there's hope yet.
Maybe. I don't know. I'd be curious to know what happens. Dee Dee, what's your take on this?
Well, I myself was part of a radio duo and, may I say, a reasonably successful one for more than 35 years, half of the Grubby and Dee Dee pair. And so I think I understand that the pressures of this particular working relationship can be intense. It's also a unique relationship, but the main thing at the very heart of it is trust. And when I first read this blow-up, I thought, gosh, is that all it was? How on earth did this bring them undone? What that tells me is that there must have been a lot more going on behind the scenes. This is just the final straw in what was something that's obviously been building up between the two of them, because that particular incident to me looked like something that could have been discussed and sorted out if they are the good friends that we're led to believe that they've been for all these decades that they've been working together. It's also surprising to me, I wonder why the blowtorch hasn't been put on whoever thought it was a good idea in the first place to network that show. Networking radio programs does not work. There are very rare exceptions, Hamish and Andy being one example, but it very, very rarely works, and it certainly didn't work trying to send that show into Melbourne.
No, because people want local content in their states. I don't know why they ever did that. Look, I'm fascinated to be a fly on the wall to figure out what happened. Seriously. Dee Dee Dunlevy, Prue McSween, nice to see you both. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thank you.